You are standing in your garden looking at your hostas and something is wrong. The leaves that were full and perfect coming out of spring are now brown at the edges. Crispy. Papery. Sometimes the whole tip of the leaf has gone that dry, burned-out color that tells you the plant is struggling. And you did everything right. You watered it. You planted it in shade. You mulched around the base. And it still looks like this. Here is what nobody tells you. Brown crispy hosta leaves are not one problem. They are 5 completely different problems that look nearly identical from a distance, and every single one of them requires a different response. If you treat the wrong cause, you either waste your time or you actively make things worse. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me 2 things. Where are you watching from, and describe exactly what your brown leaves look like. Are the edges crispy? Is it the tips only? Are there patches in the middle of the leaf? Is it happening on every plant or just one? I read every single comment, and your description might help another gardener in the same zone figure out exactly what they are dealing with. 5 causes. 5 completely different fixes. And one of them, cause number 3, is the one that catches experienced gardeners by surprise because it looks exactly like the most obvious explanation, but it isn't. Stay with me through that one especially. Cause 1. Sun scorch, the most common cause and the most misdiagnosed one. The wrong assumption. Your hosta is in shade, so sun cannot be the problem. Here is why that assumption fails in July specifically. The shade your hosta had in May is not the shade it has right now. As the sun arc shifts through summer, areas that received dappled morning light in spring can receive direct afternoon sun by midsummer. A hosta that was perfectly positioned in April can be in the wrong position by July through no change in the garden at all. The sun simply moved. And most gardeners never make that connection because they planted the hosta in shade and assume it is still in shade. Sun scorch produces very specific damage. Bleached, papery patches, not holes, not streaks, but pale, washed-out sections, on the parts of the leaf most directly exposed to afternoon sun. The damaged tissue feels dry and papery. The color goes from green to a pale tan or almost white. And it happens on the sun-facing side of the leaf, while the underside often looks relatively normal. The diagnostic test. Go outside specifically between noon and 4 in the afternoon and watch which parts of your hostas receive direct sun during that window. If the bleached areas on the leaves correspond exactly to the areas receiving direct afternoon sun, you have your answer. Sun scorch. Not drought, not disease, not pests. Blue hostas are the most vulnerable. The waxy coating that creates the blue color is physically stripped away by direct sun exposure and does not return until next spring when fresh leaves emerge. Once a blue hosta loses that coating, it looks dull, faded, and greenish for the remainder of the season regardless of what you do. The fix for existing damage: the scorched tissue will not recover. But you can stop further damage immediately by creating afternoon shade, a garden umbrella, shade cloth on stakes, or a tall container plant positioned to block the western sun exposure. The permanent fix is transplanting in autumn when temperatures cool and the plant can recover from transplant shock before winter. Cause 2. Drought stress, but not the kind you think. The wrong assumption. If you are watering your hostas, drought cannot be the problem. Here is the biology that makes this assumption wrong. Hostas have shallow, fibrous roots that spread horizontally just inches below the soil surface. That shallow root system is enormously efficient at capturing moisture in cool, consistently moist conditions, and almost completely unable to reach moisture that has moved below the root zone into deeper soil. When you water shallowly every day, the moisture wets the top inch or 2 of soil and evaporates within hours in July heat. The roots never get what they need. And the plant tells you so with brown crispy tips and edges. Drought stress damage looks different from sun scorch. The browning starts at the very tips and edges of leaves, the furthest points from the crown where water delivery is weakest, and works inward. It is usually uniform across the plant rather than concentrated on sun-facing leaves. The brown tissue is papery and dry, but the pattern is more consistent, hitting the tips of every leaf rather than bleaching patches on specific leaves. There is a specific drought scenario that catches gardeners by surprise every summer. Hostas growing under trees, under maples, oaks, pines, or any mature tree with aggressive surface roots, are in direct competition with those roots for every drop of moisture. The tree always wins. You can be watering what feels like a reasonable amount, and the tree roots are intercepting nearly all of it before it reaches the hosta. Hostas under established trees in July may need 2 to 3 times more water than hostas in open garden beds to stay properly hydrated. The diagnostic test: push your finger 3 to 4 inches into the soil at the base of the affected hosta. If it is dry at that depth, drought stress is your cause regardless of how much you think you have been watering. The fix: water more deeply and less frequently. A slow soak twice a week that drives moisture down 4 to 6 inches is more effective than a daily sprinkle that wets only the surface. Use a soaker hose or drip system rather than overhead watering. Mulch to 3 inches to retain moisture between sessions. And if your hostas are under trees, accept that they need significantly more water than the baseline and plan accordingly. Cause 3. Root competition and compaction, the cause experienced gardeners miss. This is the one I told you to stay for. And it trips up experienced gardeners specifically because it looks exactly like drought stress and responds partially to increased watering, which means people treat it as a drought problem, see partial improvement, and never identify the real cause underneath. Here is what is actually happening. In established garden beds, hosta root systems expand year after year. Other plants, shrubs, perennials, ground covers, ornamental grasses, are doing the same thing. Over time, the root systems of surrounding plants physically invade the hosta's root zone, competing for moisture and nutrients. At the same time, foot traffic, heavy rainfall, and years of soil compression can compact the soil around the hosta to the point where roots cannot penetrate it effectively. A hosta in compacted soil or with significant root competition shows exactly the same symptoms as drought stress: brown crispy tips and edges, reduced vigor, leaves that look tired and dry even after watering. The difference is in the response to watering. A drought-stressed hosta in good loose soil perks up noticeably within a day or two of deep watering. A hosta with compaction or root competition improves only slightly and never fully recovers despite consistent watering. The diagnostic test: use a hand fork or a garden knife to probe the soil around the hosta at a depth of 3 to 4 inches. Healthy garden soil should offer moderate resistance but yield to the tool. If the soil is so compacted the fork barely penetrates, or if you immediately hit a dense mat of roots from surrounding plants, you have found your real cause. The fix for compaction: carefully work a hand fork into the soil around the drip line of the hosta, the circle under the outer edge of the leaves, and gently loosen the soil to a depth of 3 to 4 inches without disturbing the hosta's own root system. Apply a 2-inch layer of finished compost over the loosened area and water it in. Earthworms and soil biology will continue the work over the following weeks. For root competition, cutting through the roots of surrounding plants with a sharp spade in a circle around the hosta, keeping 6 to 8 inches from a hosta's crown, creates a temporary barrier that gives the hosta's root system breathing room. This needs repeating every 1 to 2 years as the surrounding roots regenerate. For severe cases where both problems are significant, the most effective long-term solution is to dig and divide the hosta in autumn, improve the soil thoroughly before replanting, and give it more space from competing plants. Cause 4. Fertilizer burn, the damage you caused with good intentions. The wrong assumption: if you fertilized your hostas, you were helping them. Here is the mechanism that turns fertilizer into a problem. Fertilizers, particularly synthetic granular fertilizers, work by releasing soluble salts into the soil water that roots absorb. When those salt concentrations in the soil become too high, the chemistry reverses. Instead of the roots absorbing water from the soil pulls water out of the roots through osmosis. The root tissue desiccates from the outside in. The plant shows brown crispy tips and edges that look exactly like drought stress, because at the cellular level, that is what it is. Fertilizer burn happens in 3 specific situations. You applied too much fertilizer at once, more than the label recommendation. You applied fertilizer to dry soil rather than moist soil, concentrating the salts at the root level without enough water to dilute them. Or you applied fertilizer during a heat wave when the plant was already under stress, which amplified the salt concentration effect. The distinctive feature of fertilizer burn compared to drought stress or sun scorch: it often appears suddenly after a fertilizer application, and the damage pattern frequently shows a sharp line between healthy and damaged tissue rather than the gradual fade of drought stress. The soil around the plant may also show white crystalline deposits, visible salt residue, on the surface. The diagnostic test: think back 2 to 3 weeks. Did you fertilize? Did you apply to dry soil? Did you apply during a heat spell? Did you use more than the recommended amount? If yes to any of these, fertilizer burn is likely. The fix: water deeply and thoroughly immediately, not to hydrate the plant but to flush the excess salts downward through the soil profile and below the root zone. Water 3 times as much as you normally would in a single session, then return to normal watering. The existing brown tissue will not recover, but new growth will come in healthy once the salt concentration normalizes. Do not fertilize again until late summer at the absolute earliest, and when you do, use half the recommended rate applied to thoroughly moist soil. Cause 5. Crown rot starting from the base, the silent killer. This is the most serious cause on this list and the one that requires the fastest response, because by the time you see the symptoms above ground, the damage underground has usually been developing for weeks. Crown rot in hostas is a fungal condition that attacks the base of the plant, the crown, where all the leaf stems emerge from the root system at soil level. The fungus thrives in warm, moist, airless conditions, which is why the 2 most common causes are mulch piled directly against the crown and consistently wet soil at the base of the plant from overwatering or poor drainage. The symptoms are distinctive if you know what to look for. Unlike the other 4 causes which produce brown crispy damage on the outer parts of leaves, crown rot starts from the inside and works outward. The innermost, newest leaves show symptoms first. They may look wilted, pale, or yellowed rather than brown and crispy. As the condition progresses, leaves collapse at the base rather than drying out at the tips. The stems may look water-soaked or translucent near the crown. And if you gently pull on an affected stem, it comes away from the crown easily. Far more easily than a healthy stem, because the tissue connecting it to the crown has already been destroyed. The diagnostic test: gently part the leaves and look at the crown itself at soil level. Healthy crown tissue is firm and pale cream to white. Crown rot produces tissue that is soft, mushy, dark brown, and may smell faintly of decay. If you find this, act immediately. The fix depends on how far the rot has progressed. If only part of the crown is affected, use a clean sharp knife to cut away all the rotted tissue until you reach firm healthy tissue. Dust the cut surfaces with powdered sulfur or a copper-based fungicide. Allow the crown to dry in open air for several hours. Replant in well-draining soil and do not mulch against the crown again. If the entire crown is affected, the plant cannot be saved. Remove it completely, dispose of it in the trash rather than compost, and do not replant hostas in the same spot without improving drainage first. Prevention is straightforward. Keep mulch pulled 2 to 3 inches away from the crown at all times. Water at the base rather than over the top. Ensure the planting area drains freely and does not hold standing water after rain, and improve air circulation around the crown by not crowding hostas too tightly with other plants. 5 causes. 5 completely different fixes. And the reason most gardeners stay stuck is that they see brown crispy leaves and reach for the one response that feels most intuitive: more water, without stopping to identify which of these 5 is actually the problem. Sun scorch, bleached papery patches on sun-facing leaf surfaces, caused by afternoon sun exposure that changed since spring. Fix the light before you do anything else. Drought stress, brown tips and edges working inward uniformly, soil dry 3 to 4 inches down, especially under trees. Water deeper and less often. Root competition and compaction. Looks like drought but doesn't fully respond to watering, soil hard and dense around the plant. Loosen and create root barriers. Fertilizer burn, sudden crispy damage after a fertilizer application, sharp damage lines, possible salt deposits on soil surface. Flush with deep watering and stop fertilizing. Crown rot, inner leaves failing first, stems collapsing at the base, mushy dark tissue at the crown. Cut away rotted tissue immediately or remove the plant entirely. Identify correctly and you fix it. Misidentify and you spend the rest of the season treating the wrong thing while the real problem continues. Subscribe, because this channel exists for exactly this kind of specific, diagnostic gardening knowledge. Not generic tips. Real causes, real fixes, explained the way you actually need them. New video every 2 days. And drop your answer in the comments before you go. Which of these 5 causes matches what you are seeing right now? Tell me your zone or location and describe the damage. Is it the tips, the edges, patches in the middle, or something starting from the base? Your answer might help a gardener 3 time zones away figure out exactly what is wrong with their plant. I read every single one.